Let's get into it.
Number 10. The Man of the Moon. In 1972, during Apollo 17, the final crewed mission to the moon, astronaut Eugene Cernan captured thousands of photographs of the lunar surface. Most showed exactly what you'd expect: dust, rocks, shadows, nothing remarkable. Until years later, when one image started to raise eyebrows. At first glance, it looks like an ordinary stretch of moon terrain, but when the photo is enlarged, a disturbing detail comes into focus. In the distance stands a shape that appears unnervingly familiar, upright, vertical, casting a long shadow across the surface. It looks like a person. The image quickly became known online as the Moon Man, a solitary, human-shaped figure seemingly standing on the moon, far from the astronauts themselves. What makes the image even stranger is the silence surrounding it. Cernan never referenced anything unusual in his mission notes. No comments, no explanation. Just a photograph quietly sitting in NASA's archives, until those archives were released to the public decades later. Once people saw it, they couldn't unsee it. The shape appears to have defined proportions, something resembling a head, a central mass like a torso, narrow extensions that look uncomfortably like arms and legs, and most notably, a distinct shadow, suggesting a solid, upright object. NASA's response was predictable. Officials stated it was nothing more than an optical illusion, rocks arranged in a way that tricks the eye, combined with harsh lunar lighting. But critics weren't convinced. They pointed out that random rock formations rarely produce such balanced, symmetrical silhouettes, and even fewer cast shadows that reinforce the illusion so perfectly. Adding fuel to the mystery are other odd accounts from Apollo missions. Multiple astronauts reported strange visual anomalies, brief flashes of light near the lunar horizon. Some described an unsettling sensation of being observed. As for the figure itself, it has never been conclusively disproven. Some insist it's just geology. Others believe it could be an artificial structure, a remnant, a marker, something placed there long before humans ever dreamed of spaceflight. Whatever the truth is, the figure remains motionless, silent, unchanged, standing on a world that has existed for billions of years, watching as humanity briefly arrived and left again. And maybe that's what makes it so disturbing. The possibility that when we reached the moon, we weren't the first ones to find it. Number 9. The Strange Red Light. In 1969, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin weren't expecting surprises. The moon was supposed to be simple: dust, rocks, and an overwhelming sense of nothing. Instead, something followed them. During Apollo 11's journey toward the moon, both astronauts noticed a strange source of light drifting alongside their spacecraft. It wasn't fixed like a star. It wasn't flashing randomly like debris. It moved with them. A soft glow. Red. Then white. Then red again. It kept pace for miles. The crew didn't blurt this out to mission control. They understood the stakes. Mentioning unidentified objects could raise alarms, trigger investigations, or even jeopardize the mission. So instead, they spoke carefully, asking indirect questions, trying to confirm whether what they were seeing could be part of their own equipment. They asked about the SIVB rocket stage, the booster that had helped launch them. Houston's answer was blunt. It was nowhere nearby. That meant the light wasn't theirs. For several minutes, Armstrong and Aldrin watched as the glowing object maintained distance, neither approaching nor falling behind. Then, without warning, it dimmed and vanished. The incident stayed quiet during the mission, but years later, both men acknowledged that they had witnessed something they couldn't explain. Aldrin would later describe the object as elongated, almost cylindrical, with a pulsing luminosity that felt deliberate rather than random. NASA eventually offered an explanation: a loose panel, a reflection, a trick of sunlight hitting discarded hardware at just the right angle. Except there was a problem. Reflections don't pace spacecraft. Loose panels don't change intensity in rhythmic patterns. And debris doesn't behave like it's observing. Space doesn't distort vision the way Earth's atmosphere does. There's no haze, no clouds, no refraction to hide behind. What you see out there is what's actually there. And the idea that something unknown may have accompanied humanity's very first voyage beyond Earth, that something silently matched speed, watched, and then slipped away, that thought doesn't disappear as easily as the light did. Maybe it was debris. Or maybe it was something else entirely, present for the moment when a species took its first step into the wider universe. Number 8. The Cosmic Jellyfish. In 1996, astronauts aboard the Space Shuttle Columbia saw something that had no business being alive, because it was in space. During a routine observation period, multiple crew members reported glowing, translucent shapes drifting just outside the shuttle's viewport. They pulsed, they undulated, and they moved in ways that looked disturbingly intentional. The astronauts gave them a nickname, the Cosmic Jellyfish. These luminous objects appeared to have tendrils of light, long flowing extensions that seemed to contract and expand, almost like propulsion. They didn't tumble like debris, they didn't scatter like ice crystals. They swam. NASA's official explanation was quick and tidy, sunlight reflecting off ice particles or material released from the shuttle itself. Case closed. Except, not really. Astronauts from other missions, on different spacecraft, years apart, reported seeing the exact same thing. Translucent bodies, bioluminescent-like pulsing, coordinated movement patterns eerily similar to marine organisms back on Earth. And then there was the behavior. Unlike space debris, which follows predictable trajectories governed by physics, these objects were observed changing direction without any visible force acting on them. No thrusters, no impacts, just sudden, deliberate movement. In 2001, aboard the International Space Station, cosmonaut Yuri Usachov captured video footage of luminous objects that appeared to merge together, separate again, and pulse in synchronized rhythms, as if responding to one another. Scientists scrambled for explanations. Some proposed exotic plasma formations, others suggested unknown atmospheric phenomena occurring at the thin boundary between Earth's atmosphere and space. Another theory argued that high-energy particles interacting with a spacecraft's electromagnetic field could create complex visual artifacts. All plausible, all unproven. Because here's the problem. If these sightings are just reflections or ice crystals, why do they keep appearing in the same biological shapes? Why do they move in coordinated patterns? And why, despite decades of improved cameras, sensors, and continuous observation aboard the ISS, do they remain so difficult to document conclusively? Maybe they're nothing more than tricks of light. Or maybe the space just above our planet isn't as empty as we like to think. Number 7. The Whispering Stars. In March of 2009, during a routine spacewalk outside the International Space Station, astronaut John Phillips experienced something that was never listed on the checklist. While drifting above Earth, focused on maintenance work, his radio suddenly picked up a signal that shouldn't have been there. Not static, not interference. Voices. Low, faint sounds filtered through his headset, soft murmurs layered with repeating rhythms, arriving on a frequency that was supposed to be completely inactive. The transmission lasted for nearly 12 minutes, rising and falling in intensity before cutting out as suddenly as it began. Mission Control heard it too, and they had no idea where it came from. The signal didn't match known satellite traffic, it didn't align with station systems, and it didn't resemble any recorded form of space radio noise. NASA's communication team logged the incident and quietly moved on. Except it didn't stop. Between 2009 and 2017, astronauts on 14 separate spacewalks reported eerily similar audio anomalies. Each time, the pattern repeated itself. First, a sequence of clean, precise pulses, mathematically structured, often resembling prime number spacing. Then came the unsettling part, a modulation layered over the signal, soft, irregular, almost like whispered speech without recognizable words. Not random, not chaotic. Intentional. Radio astronomers later analyzed fragments of these transmissions and confirmed something troubling. The signals didn't match any terrestrial source, satellite system, or known form of electromagnetic interference. Even stranger, the whispers were strongest when astronauts were positioned on the dark side of Earth, shielded from the planet's constant flood of radio noise. Then came the correlation. The frequency shifts within the signal appeared to align precisely with radiation bursts detected from distant neutron stars. Objects thousands of light years away. One NASA scientist reportedly described the overlap as statistically impossible. The official explanation points to interactions between Earth's magnetosphere and charged particles carried by the solar wind, natural radio phenomena that the human brain may interpret as patterns. But that explanation falls apart under scrutiny. If this were simple interference, why does it only happen during spacewalks? Why not inside the station, where communication equipment is more sensitive? And why does the signal contain structured mathematics? No one has answered those questions. What remains is a recurring phenomenon, quiet, rhythmic, and persistent, appearing only when humans step outside their spacecraft and expose themselves directly to the void. Whispers drifting through the silence of space. The universe broadcasts constantly across countless frequencies. Most of them we ignore, some we can't hear, and some may not be meant for us to understand.
Number 6. The knocking in space. In 2003, Yang Liwei became China's first astronaut to orbit Earth. Alone aboard Shenzhou 5, he was suspended in that familiar, unsettling quiet astronauts always talk about. The kind of silence so complete you become aware of every breath, every heartbeat. Then the silence broke. A sharp sound struck the outside of the spacecraft. Not static, not vibration. A knock, metallic, clean, followed by another, and then another. Yang stopped moving. There was no debris nearby, no alarms, no indication that anything had impacted the capsule. Outside the window, space was perfectly still. The sound returned at uneven intervals. Not chaotic, but not mechanical either. It carried a rhythm, almost deliberate, almost like someone on the outside was testing the hull. And there was only one problem. There was nothing out there. When Yang returned to Earth, engineers took his report seriously. They inspected the capsule inch by inch. They struck the exterior with tools, tapped panels, simulated impacts, and recreated pressure changes. Nothing sounded the same. The alloy of the spacecraft simply didn't produce that tone. What made the incident more disturbing was that Yang wasn't alone in hearing it. On later missions, other Chinese astronauts reported the same phenomenon. Distinct knocking sounds coming from outside their spacecraft while in orbit. Eventually, a familiar explanation was offered. Thermal expansion. The metal shell heating and cooling as it moved in and out of sunlight, flexing just enough to create noise. But Yang rejected it. He said it wasn't a creak, it wasn't a groan, it wasn't random stress, it was a knock. Intentional. Imagine being completely alone more than 200 miles above Earth. No air, no sound waves, no way for noise to travel at all. And something knocks anyway, not from inside, from the outside. Space is often described as empty, but maybe that's the wrong word. Maybe it's just very, very quiet. And sometimes, something in that quiet decides to make itself known. Number 5. The space spiders. In February of 2011, astronauts conducting routine exterior work on the International Space Station noticed something that made them stop mid-task. Clinging to the handrails and equipment housings on the Russian module were structures that hadn't been there before. Thin, intricate, deliberate. They looked like webs. Delicate filament networks stretched outward from central points, forming precise geometric patterns that were disturbingly similar to spider webs back on Earth. Except these weren't made of silk, and they weren't supposed to exist in space at all. What made the discovery worse was the timing. An EVA just 2 weeks earlier had shown nothing unusual. Whatever these structures were, they had formed quickly and silently. NASA and Roscosmos initially suggested a harmless explanation. Crystallized residue, leaked coolant, escaped water vapor freezing and arranging itself in microgravity. Problem was, no one could recreate them. Laboratory tests under simulated space conditions failed to produce anything remotely as complex. When small samples were examined inside the station, scientists found silicon-based compounds mixed with carbon traces, arranged in patterns that didn't match any known crystallization process. Then it happened again. And again. Between 2011 and 2018, similar web-like formations appeared on the station's exterior 8 separate times. Each incident shared strange similarities. They formed while the ISS passed through regions of heightened solar activity. They appeared to react to changes in the surrounding electromagnetic environment. And most unsettling of all, when micrometeoroids damaged parts of the structures, the patterns didn't stay broken. They reformed. Within hours, the filaments realigned themselves, restoring the same geometric layouts as before. The leading scientific theory suggests these may be exotic crystallization effects unique to microgravity, outgassed materials interacting with charged particles, guided by electromagnetic fields into unnatural precision. But that theory doesn't explain everything. Why do they prefer certain metal alloys? Why do they appear only in specific locations? And why do they behave like systems responding to their environment? Some researchers quietly admit the behavior looks less like passive matter and more like organization. The so-called space spiders are a reminder that even in a structure built entirely by humans, orbiting hundreds of miles above Earth, unfamiliar processes can emerge. When gravity lets go, matter doesn't just float. Sometimes, it starts arranging itself. Number 4. The face. Outside the window. In 1985, while orbiting Earth aboard the Space Shuttle Discovery, astronaut Charles Walker encountered something he never put on any official report. It happened late into the mission. Most of the crew was asleep. The cabin lights were dimmed to near darkness. Walker drifted near one of the shuttle's windows, watching Earth's glow slide slowly beneath them. That's when he noticed it. In the blackness beyond the glass, something appeared to be looking back. A shape. Pale? Human-like. At first, he assumed it had to be a reflection, his own face distorted by the glass in low light. But when he shifted position, the image didn't move with him. And when he glanced behind him, there was no one else awake. The face remained, faint but unmistakable. 2 dark hollows where eyes should be, a suggestion of a mouth. Its features were softly illuminated by reflected light from Earth far below, just enough detail to make his stomach drop. Walker froze. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, looked again. It was still there, not pressed against the glass, not drifting, just suspended in the darkness outside the shuttle, far enough away to feel unreachable, yet close enough to feel personal. After several long seconds, the shape slowly faded back into the void. The next morning, Walker mentioned it casually to the rest of the crew. The response was immediate and dismissive. Fatigue, shadows, optical illusion, the brain filling in patterns where none exist. But Walker never accepted that explanation. He later wrote that he knew exactly what reflections looked like in space. He'd seen them countless times. This wasn't one of them. Others offered alternative theories, a piece of debris briefly catching the light, visual hallucinations caused by exhaustion and disrupted sleep cycles. Yet what unsettled people most was how Walker described the expression. It wasn't threatening, it wasn't distorted, it was calm, observant, like something quietly watching. Outside that window was pure nothingness. No atmosphere, no sound, no movement. Just endless black space stretching in every direction. And for one brief, silent moment, something in that emptiness looked back. Number 3. Cosmic lightning. In August of 2015, astronauts aboard the International Space Station watched a thunderstorm over Central Africa do something storms are not supposed to do. Instead of lightning crashing down toward Earth, massive columns of energy erupted upward, launching themselves out of the clouds and into space. What the crew saw didn't resemble normal lightning. These were towering blue-white structures that climbed hundreds of miles above the planet, far beyond the altitude of known phenomena like sprites or blue jets. And they didn't vanish in a flash. They stayed. For nearly 2 full minutes, the glowing columns pulsed and intensified, growing brighter and more complex before slowly fading back into nothing. Instruments aboard the ISS went wild, registering electromagnetic spikes far stronger than anything ever recorded from atmospheric electricity. But the most disturbing detail wasn't their size, it was their behavior. The energy didn't discharge randomly. It branched, reconnected, and reorganized itself in repeating patterns, structures that looked eerily similar to neural networks, as if the lightning were thinking its way upward. Between 2015 and 2023, astronauts and satellites documented similar events 13 times, always above the most violent storm systems on Earth. High-resolution footage revealed that these weren't simple bolts of electricity, but intricate, structured formations, temporary bridges linking Earth's atmosphere directly to space. During one event in 2019, onboard sensors detected particles being accelerated to near relativistic speeds inside these energy columns. That should not be possible. Earth's upper atmosphere simply doesn't contain the conditions required to produce that kind of acceleration. Scientists have offered explanations: exotic plasma physics, momentary disturbances in Earth's magnetic field, solar particles slipping through weakened regions of the magnetosphere. Others believe these events may represent a previously unknown system, a kind of planetary release valve, allowing Earth to discharge massive electrical energy directly into space during extreme storms. But those explanations raise uncomfortable questions. If this is a natural process, it means our planet's electrical connection to space is far more active and far more complex than current models suggest. And if it isn't entirely natural, then something is organizing energy on a scale we don't yet understand, in the thin boundary between our atmosphere and the void beyond it.
Number 2. STS-75 UFO Swarm. In February of 1996, the Space Shuttle Columbia launched on a mission known as STS-75. On paper, it was a technical experiment, deploying a massive electrical tether, nearly 12 miles long, designed to generate power by interacting with Earth's magnetic field. At first, everything worked perfectly. Then the tether snapped. The cable tore free from the shuttle and drifted away into space, trailing into darkness like a severed nerve. Cameras continued recording as engineers tried to understand what had gone wrong. That's when the footage changed. Small, glowing shapes began to appear on screen. At first, just a few. Circular, translucent objects drifting past the camera. They shimmered faintly, pulsing as they moved. Then more appeared, and more. Soon, hundreds of luminous forms filled the frame. They didn't tumble like debris. They didn't scatter randomly. They moved slowly, independently, as if suspended in an invisible current, each one following its own path. NASA's initial explanation was immediate and confident: ice particles, frozen waste or condensation reflecting sunlight near the camera lens. Case closed. Except, the footage didn't behave like ice. Later analysis revealed that many of the objects appeared to pass behind the severed tether, meaning they weren't close to the camera at all. They were large, and they were far away. Even stranger, their motion didn't follow simple orbital mechanics. Some rotated in place. Others changed speed without obvious cause. A few appeared to stop entirely, hovering, before drifting off again. Physics didn't quite fit. Theories exploded online. Some suggested charged debris interacting with the tether's electrical field. Others proposed something far stranger: plasma-based entities, energy organisms that could exist within magnetic fields, invisible to us under normal conditions. NASA dismissed it all as illusion, but the video never went away, and once you see it, it's hard to ignore what it looks like. Not ice, not debris, a swarm. One astronaut later described the view as feeling less like space and more like staring into a living ocean, filled with drifting forms just beyond our understanding. Maybe it was nothing, or maybe, for a brief moment, humanity caught sight of something that usually stays hidden, moving silently through Earth's magnetic veil, something that was never meant to be noticed.
Number 1.
The Phantom Space Station. In March of 1991, cosmonauts aboard the Soviet space station Mir logged an observation they couldn't explain, and quietly hoped they'd never see again. Floating a short distance away from the station was something that shouldn't have existed. Commander Anatoly Artsebarsky described it as a massive structure, faint but clearly defined. Roughly the size of a space station, semi-transparent, hanging in orbit about 2 kilometers away. For nearly 3 minutes, it stayed there. It didn't approach. It didn't drift off. It simply held position relative to Mir, before slowly fading from view. The incident was recorded and officially dismissed as an optical illusion, an unfortunate alignment of light, shadow, and reflective surfaces unique to orbital conditions. Except it didn't stop. Between 1995 and 2001, 4 separate Mir crews reported nearly identical sightings. Each time, the same details emerged: a large, station-like outline, the same distance, the same brief duration, and each time, something else accompanied it: communication glitches, sensor irregularities, instrument readings that spiked or dropped without explanation, then returned to normal once the structure vanished. When Mir was deliberately deorbited in 2001, Many assumed the mystery would end with it. It didn't. In 2006, during a spacewalk outside the International Space Station, an astronaut reported seeing a massive shadowy form briefly silhouetted against Earth below. Too large to be debris, too structured to ignore. NASA attributed the sighting to reflections from solar panels, layered window distortions, or pareidolia, the human brain imposing familiar shapes onto random stimuli. All reasonable explanations. But what unsettles researchers isn't any single sighting. It's the consistency. Different crews, different spacecraft, different decades, all describing the same impossible thing. The Phantom Space Station stands as a reminder that even in orbit, one of the most monitored environments humanity has ever created, the boundary between illusion and observation may be thinner than we're comfortable admitting.